So, good morning, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Good evening, Trevor. I know it's nighttime over there. I'm sorry about your sleep apnea problem. Me doing these things on a daily basis is quite difficult. Today, I'll go through the reasoning why I'm doing this in a moment, but today I've got someone who's not usually on YouTube, but is huge, really huge on Twitter, or X as it now is. I think, Arnaud, you were in the top 100 users of X. Is that correct?
I think it was like number 186 or something.
Oh, top 200.
Yeah.
That's still not bad. Have you any idea how many users on X there are?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have no idea. I mean, I guess it's hundreds of millions, but I don't have a precise number.
How did you feel when you found that you were in the top 200?
It was a bit weird. I mean, it's a ranking that I think varies every day. So that was a particularly popular week for my tweets, I guess. So, but yeah, it's in a way it's a bit scary because you tell yourself you really have to write the right things because otherwise there will be I don't know, millions, tens of millions of people reading something stupid that you might write. So it is
Well, you're very positive on China. But the one thing I've noticed about you, you're full of facts. It's very hard to dispute what you say. And I kind of like that about a few people on Twitter. There's a lot of people express opinions. And I know you do that, but you express opinions supported with absolute fact. And it's very hard to argue. Do you get the haters?
I get some haters, surprisingly few actually. Maybe, I don't know, one guy a day or something. But most of the time when I express myself on X, so I source everything I say. I make a point of that. I include a source. And anyway, most of the time it's not myself expressing my opinion, but I quote an article from that guy, an interview from someone else, and so on.
Yeah.
So people can't attack me personally because it's other, very credible people that that say something. So I get very, very little hatred, much less than most people, I guess.
Yeah, I get very little as well. I get, like yourself, one or two a day. Some of them who are downright rude, I'll just block. I'm not interested. But some of them I actually enter into an engagement with and give them one or two responses. But yeah, it's very hard to argue when if, for example, I quite often quote the Ipsos Global Happiness Index and say, well, please don't argue with me that people in China are happy. I see it every day. I know this, but here's an internationally recognized survey saying that they are. Go argue with them. That's the real answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My policy when it comes to people who sort of engage negatively with me is if they're being fair, like with proper arguments and so on, I engage. But if it's like ad hominem or insults and so on, then typically I do like you on block them because you can waste too much time on those things.
Oh yeah, we can waste a lot of time on X. So anyway, let's get down to the point. Let's get down to the point now. The reason I'm talking to three people it was 4 days. It wasn't 3 days, but over 4 days, I've talked to three people. I'm in Guangdong. I think you're in Shanghai, right?
I was. Right now, I'm in Kuala Lumpur.
Oh, nice. Very nice. That's why I'm wearing this and you're wearing that.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you just had good central heating. Okay, so Kuala Lumpur's nice. But right now in China, we're going through the process of the 2 sessions for the provincial and municipal governments. So the Shanghai municipal government and the Guangdong provincial government are having their 2-session meetings where they declare their what's happened last year. So this is called their work report. and they talk about what's going to happen next year, and then this all gets consolidated. And in March, it all goes up to the 2 sessions of the big government, the central government. So this tends to get completely ignored in Western media. So I thought it would be a good time to talk to some people who know and understand China about where they see China is going. So you're the third today. Yesterday, I talked to Liber about the techo side of things. And I had a local businessman on, a friend of mine actually here in Zhongshan, called Greg Warren, a couple of days ago, to talk about how investments and business are going here. So your talk today is generally about where China is going. It's China's opportunities, China's challenges, maybe a few threats that China poses or has posed to it. So let's get started with the, not going to put you on the spot with detailed stuff, but what do you know about you have a broad knowledge base, new energy vehicles, lithium batteries, AI, biotech. Where are we going in terms of business sectors with strong potential here in China?
I mean, the way I think about it is that there are several key themes to China's development. So one key theme, for instance, that's very clear is to move up the value chain. So, for instance, we've been able to see that quite strikingly with cars, where historically China was more of a provider of car parts. It was the world's major exporters of car parts, car components, and so on. Now is the world's largest exporters of cars, period.
Yeah.
And so I think China is trying to do that for quite a lot of industries. So, phones, computers, pretty much everything, really. So that's one theme. Another very big theme is ecology. I think what Xi Jinping keeps saying is to build an ecological civilization. I think that's the term, which people underestimate how important actually it is in China. One thing that struck me is I was traveling in the northeast of China this last summer. And in Inner Mongolia, we were participating to Nadam, which is one of those big Mongolian festivals. And so they had, how do you call that, some sort of, it was a big event and so on. At the beginning of the event, there were, how do you call that, people marching, and the 3 key themes of the march were first, the party, second, ecology, and third, the army. So, ecology is really up there with the most important things in China. I think that really illustrates just how important it is. And then it comes up, what that means concretely in terms of development is energy, basically. So, installing a lot of, green energy, solar panels, wind turbines, and so on and so forth. China is innovating a lot as well in the energy field. So, for instance, they have this new type of nuclear reactors with molten salts, which, because they don't use water, can be installed even in the middle of the desert. So there are a lot of different initiatives under this big theme. Yeah. Then another theme is to counter external threats. So I guess you could call it security. So, for instance, as we all know, the US has put sanctions on China, for instance, on semiconductors, trying to basically stop Chinese development on that specific technology. It's a bit like you must have read the book the Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin, where you have those invading aliens coming to Earth, and they will take some time to arrive, but ahead of themselves, they sent a little probe that somehow managed to stop technological development on Earth in order to, then make the invading aliens' job easier. So I think the US has a bit of a similar strategy with China, just stop its, trying to stop its technological development. And of course, as a response to that, China is doubling down. For instance, trying to, take a lead in terms of semiconductor development. And then you have other themes like, China is trying to become a much more innovative society. So putting a lot of budget and resources into innovation, technological development on the technologies that matter for the future, like AI, 5G, quantum computing, biotech, green energy, and so on and so forth. I was struck to read that there was a ranking on top universities in terms of how many papers they publish, hard science paper like physics, biology, and so on and so forth. How many papers they publish in top publication, like top 1% publication. Out of the top 10 universities, now 8 are Chinese.
Wow.
So yeah, that was, I think, very impressive. And the two others were American. I think it was MIT and Stanford. So yeah, they're putting a huge amount of resources into that. So yeah, I think those are the key themes to me. And then there are other things like continue deflating the real estate bubble, which China is going through growing pains around that at the moment. And then, of course, you have, things like ensuring meritocracy, which is also a big theme. So that's why, for instance, a couple of years ago, they decided to completely stop the tutoring industry.
Yeah.
As you remember,
this enforced my retirement.
Yeah.
That move enforced my retirement and got me onto Twitter and YouTube.
Ooh, really? Okay. I didn't realize that. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, there you go. So
that was pretty much what I was doing for the last couple of years of working here. I was a private tutor. I used to be an IELTS examiner. And of course, that's a very useful skill to have here in Guangdong anyway, because so many thousands take that test. But yeah, I lost that job. I want to double back on one of the things you said. I think this is perhaps the most underestimated, and you said it's underestimated, is the ecology. This has been going on much longer than I thought. I don't know if you're aware of this. Xi Jinping, there is a book that was released about Xi Jinping's work when he was the governor or party secretary of Zhejiang province. And that's from 2003, 2004, and 2005. It is memorandums and speeches that he's made. And all through it, the underlying theme is that we cannot build a modern society unless we care for our ecology. So we're going back 20 years and he was doing it even then.
Yeah, I actually saw that. I think he's... that's clearly something that's very important to him. That's true. And but China's real effort in this started much more recently. I think it was more like something at 2015, 2016. There was a real push around that, and the way they are going about it is quite interesting because many people often assume with China that it's all very centralized, But actually, it's the exact contrary. So I was listening to a fascinating presentation by Keyu Jin, who is one of the rare China experts located in the West who actually knows something about China. She's a teacher at the London School of Economics. And she studied the solar industry, and she was showing that there was a central decision by the central government to develop the solar industry, but then the actual implementation of that was completely delegated to the local level, to provinces, towns, and so on. And she was showing how at one point, I think it was starting from 2015, you could see solar companies just pop up like literally everywhere in China, and then starting to compete with each other. And I think that's a real strength of the Chinese model, in that often when you take, I don't know, France or the US, you have one big powerful company sort of emerging at the national level, but in China that happens. It's like there are many countries in the same country. That happens at the provincial level, and they're really supported by the local provincial government, and local governments, change their legislation all the time to promote their local businesses. So you really have, China is really, many countries within the same country, and that's why you have such intense competition within the country that allows the emergence of extremely powerful companies then at the national level, because if you win the internal Chinese competition, it means you're really, really good.
Yeah. So then it creates companies like BYD, which started as a mobile phone battery maker, and now everything. You mentioned car parts. They never went through that. They used to import car parts. I had a walk through the. They have a huge showroom in administrative building in Shenzhen, and I had a walk through there. They explained how this worked. This is a one company that started off with one product, batteries, phone batteries. And then they decided that they would do something else. And then they moved they were making televisions at one stage, all kinds of different products. And then they got into cars, and they were bringing in parts to make cars. And suddenly they said, well, we need to, American companies said, well, you can't have that part anymore. We're not selling it to you. So they said, okay, we'll go and make our own. And that's how they did it. It's all done locally. Everything, 100% of BYD is sourced inside of BYD. Now,
I actually think I visited the same showroom as you in Shenzhen last October.
All right.
So I see exactly what you're speaking about.
Yeah, I was there in probably the October before. It's 18 months ago now since I was there. But yeah, I did the tour. But I was on the tour with Fernando, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's move on a little bit. Do you think China is still attractive to foreign companies? It seems that it may not be, according to the media, but what's your feeling for this?
I think, China is an enormous market, and the middle class is still growing. In fact, I was listening to China's premier speech at Davos a couple of weeks ago, and he said that his own expectation was that China's middle class would double again within 10 years, from 400 million people today to 800 million people in 10 years, which means that the size of China's middle class will be the whole European population together with the US. So it's a market that's as big as the entire West of people just in middle class, whereas in the entire West, it's not only middle class, of course. You also have significant poverty. So from that respect, it's of course an extremely attractive place. But then, of course, I think the main issue that foreign companies have when it comes to China is that domestic companies are becoming just incredibly strong competitors in many fields. So to continue with the theme of cars. Elon Musk just yesterday said that Chinese car companies are basically, I think his expression was extremely good, on that they will destroy most other car companies around the world. I think he literally said that. So if you place yourself in the shoes of car manufacturers, of course you're going to say that that China is less attractive to you, because you face this incredibly tough competition. So I think that's really the main issue. It's not the market, it's not how much people have, it's not what they can afford. It's the strength of the local competition, which means that in order to compete, you need to spend enormous resources and play the China competition game, which is very hard to play. So I think that's the problem.
Which sectors do you think might be appealing to? Obviously, the cars are no longer appealing. We've got BMW, Mercedes, we've got VW. A lot of the Germans are already manufacturing here and doing very well. This is their biggest market. But apart from them, what kind of sectors, what business sectors do you think will be attractive to international businesses?
Look, first of all, I think that cars are still appealing. In fact, I think that car companies don't have a choice. If they want to remain competitive on the global stage, they have to engage in the Chinese market, because you don't progress by erecting trade barriers on protecting you from stronger competitors from abroad, because then you fall behind technologically. The way you keep up is by exposing yourself to those stronger competitors and learning from them and catching up, really. And that's how China did it, actually. It was very, very bad in terms of making cars. I mean, if you looked at, to speak again about Elon Musk, he was asked about Chinese car companies in 2011 on Bloomberg, and he was literally laughing,
Yes.
saying that, those car companies are basically a joke and he doesn't think they're competition. And at the time, to be fair, he was right. They were a joke. Like no one could see them as competitors. But what China did, instead of protecting their domestic market and saying we're so behind that we shouldn't expose ourselves to those, either Tesla or Mercedes or BMW and so on, they did the exact contrary. They invited BMW. Their biggest factory in the world is in the northeast of China. I can't remember the name. Yeah, and they invited Tesla famously. They have the biggest factory in the world in Shanghai. So they invited everyone and said, come, we want to learn from you, basically. Because of your difference.
That's where the West accuses them of technology theft, when in fact it's technology transfer, which is quite legitimate. You want to do business in our country, you got to share the technology. Now, they wanted to do business, so they transferred their tech.
In that case, I don't even think it's so much technology transfer as exposure to competition. I don't think Tesla, for instance, transferred any technology to Chinese EV companies, but the mere fact that they were here in the market meant that companies like BYD, for instance, had to catch up with them to offer competitive products if they wanted to survive. And it is that exposure that led them to double down on catch up.
I remember when Geely first bought Volvo in Sweden. Many people in China were making a joke about it. The Geely owners suddenly have a good car, and the Volvo owners suddenly have a Geely. So it was kind of, they were losing and they were winning. But they've done very, very well with that now. And the Volvo is still a good car, and Geely is a great car. This is an interesting statistic. In 2023, 53,700 foreign invested enterprises. This is an increase. This is something that we don't see in the media.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Why do you think the media are so negative about China?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is inertia from what I would call Liber hegemony mode. So if you look, we've gone from bipolarity. So it was the US versus the Soviet Union, to a period of like 30, 40 years of Liber hegemony, where the US was the dominant power on the world stage. On the goal, stated or unstated, at least it was the view of most people in the West, was that it was the end of history, where, inspired by the might of America, the whole world will convert to liberal democracy. And any country that didn't do that was backward, got it wrong, and would eventually see the light. And so I think a lot of journalists who are writing in media today are still in that mental framework, seeing countries like China, but also Russia or Iran and so on as just seeing it wrong, and therefore seeing their role as explaining to the public that they are wrong, they're on the wrong path, we've got it right, the best system is ours, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of the ideological mindset of those journalists. And then, of course, I think that most foreign journalists just lack a lot of knowledge, simply, about China. Most people
ask you that because you had a personal experience with this. You put out on X, which I think was still called Twitter at the time you put it out, with the Le Monde having a very different experience to you at the same place. Do you think that this is journalists who actually don't really understand China? Or is this journalists who are told, please don't write positively about China? Is it actually, and this sounds a little conspiratorial, is it actually an organized attempt, or is it just a case of lack of real on-the-ground knowledge? What do you think?
I think, first of all, there is a big lack of knowledge. I've met quite a few of those French journalists writing about China, including some in China. And the sad truth is that they don't speak Chinese. It was, when they arrived as journalists in China, it was the first time that they ever set foot in the country, most of the time. And often they stay within their cycle of expats, because they can't speak to the local population since they don't speak the language. And at the end of the day, it's not that different than if they had stayed in France, because they stay among French people and don't really get the vibe from the country. So there is that aspect. On the directive, whether they're told to write something bad about China, I think it's more of a case of how those people are selected. I don't think there is. I mean, I'm sure it must happen in some cases with editors and so on. But I think what's more important is that, for instance, if you take France, most journalists have gone through a specific journalism school located in Lille, in the north of France, and those they're very formatted ideologically, and by their formation, by their studies, the way they've been formatted, they just wouldn't write. We don't need to tell them anything. They just wouldn't write something positive about a country that's not a liberal democracy. That's it. And then on negative media also, I think there is a whole industry of like think tanks, NGOs, various institutions which are tied to Western governments, and in their case, they're literally paid to produce negative stuff on China, which is then taken on written in the press. So a good example of that is ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute in Australia, which keeps writing reports about very negative reports about China. And they're funded by the U.S. State Department, amongst others. Or you have, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, which
friend Adrian Zenz.
Yeah, exactly. So those guys are literally an anti-communist propaganda shop. And so, of course, their job is literally to produce negative reports about communist countries. And when it comes to communist countries, China is the big one. So they spend a lot of efforts writing stuff on China, which again then gets written in the press. But taking a step back, at the end of the day, I don't think it's China that suffers so much from that. I think it's actually more the West that is shooting itself in the foot with that, because it's the famous sentence: if you don't know your enemy, you will succumb in every battle. Or I don't remember the exact quote. I think it's very important that for the West to understand China, in order to, China is not going to disappear. You're going to compete with China. China is there, is very powerful, and so on. If you keep lying to yourself about China, then you don't base your decisions how to react to China based on truth, and that's very damaging, I think.
I wonder if we've already reached that point where China has already exceeded almost every expectation and still being reported negatively. Do you think we've reached that point where they really don't know China now?
I think I'm actually quite positive, because I think we've reached that point, but we're also progressively reaching the point where more and more people in the West realize that it's not China they're hurting with all the negative stuff, but themselves, because they keep seeing, reality punch them in the face, the West. Whether it is with the Ukraine war, whether it is with Israel and Gaza. For Ukraine, they thought, okay, the whole world is going to be on our side. And then turns out that's not true at all. Like the entire global south is like, no, we're not on your side, because, largely because you don't understand us. You don't understand our concerns. You're only preoccupied with yourself. You're completely blind to the reality of the world. And same thing on Gaza and on Israel. The entire global south is like, this is totally unacceptable. And so I think the more reality punches the West in the face, the more they're going to be like, okay, at some point we need to realize that that we're not doing things right. We're not understanding the world as it evolves. We are now in a multipolar world. So instead of still living in the illusion that we are in liberal hegemony, everyone wants to be like us, and so on, that's clearly not the case. Let's take a step back and understand the world as it is, not as we would want it to be.
I noticed something that I think it was you that posted a while ago, where it showed the global south, the sales to the global south and the sales to what I would call the international community. The international community has gone down and the global south has gone up. Do you think that's China's competitive edge in the future? New markets?
I think that's clearly a strategy by China, which makes complete sense, because the West is actually not growing fast at all. There was this fascinating number that Europe, which economy is like, I don't remember exactly, but it's, I think, 10 times the size or something as Asian. So Asian is the Southeast Asian countries. Despite the fact that Europe's economy is 10 times the size as Asian as a whole, within the past 10 years, I think it was, Asian generated more economic growth for the world than Europe, because it was just growing so much faster than Europe. And so if you're China, it makes a lot of sense to position yourself as the leading trading partner with those fast-growing economies, the entire global south, so be it Asian, African countries, South American countries, and so on, and take the lead in that, because the West is, not that interested so far in those countries. And down the line, as those countries grow further and further, following China, really developing middle class, then China's position as their preferred economic partner is going to be immensely valuable. So I think that's kind of the logic there.
Yeah, it certainly seems to me that there's more, because I read Chinese media a lot more than Western media now. And it certainly seems to me that there are more diplomatic visits, there are more things going on in places like Africa, Central and South America. There certainly seems to be more growth focused on what we would have previously called the underdeveloped world, the global South, the third world, all that kind of thing. It seems to me that China is getting very much into those markets. And really not into the developed markets anymore. And I know that American trade is down, but interestingly, Mexican trade is right up. So America's trade with Mexico has gone right up too. So it appears that they've stopped selling to America, not stopped selling, but selling less to America, selling more to Mexico, and now Mexico is selling that to America. So America's paying more for it through a middleman.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there is also an effort by the West. At first, they wanted to decouple, but that's clearly completely unrealistic. So now the buzzword is de-risking, and nobody quite knows what it means. But basically, the idea is to be less dependent on China. And so what they do is, they try to buy more from third countries like Mexico or, some countries in North Africa and so on. But like you say, often it's the case where those countries then become simply intermediaries between the West and China. And, in the end, everyone is happy, like China still sells. But via the intermediary is happy because now they get paid. The West is happy because they have, they think they're de-risking from China when that's actually not the case at all.
Yeah, this is a very interesting thing, this de-risk. The only reason that you would need to de-risk is because there is a threat. Do you think that China poses any kind, apart from economy, does China pose any military threat to anyone?
I mean, if you look historically, China hasn't fired a single bullet abroad in over 40 years. Mm-hmm. The last time was during the Vietnam War, the war of China with Vietnam. Yeah. I think it was in 1979. So in terms of military threatening countries or warmongering countries, China is probably one of the least, military active countries abroad out there. And if you look at China's history, that's never been their thing. They've never gone abroad to, trying to colonize, take over other countries and so on. What they do want to do is to repel American military influence in their neighborhood. So, if you look at the map of American military bases, it's all around China. Mm-hmm. And of course, naturally, China doesn't like that, which is understandable. And I do think one of their long-term strategic objectives is to get rid of that, which makes perfect sense. But of course, America doesn't like that, and they perceive that as a threat. But if you look at things objectively, it's fairer that China will want to do that rather than America staying, keeping its military presence there. It's simply, not their own geographic neighborhood at all.
Okay. Moving away from geopolitics on a smaller scale, you're an entrepreneur who came to China and you're doing a lot of business in the traditional medicine industry, right?
Yeah, a lot is maybe putting it. Okay. It is my business.
some businesses. Okay. Yeah. Perhaps I should rephrase that. You're in the traditional medicine. Do you think that China is a good place for smaller organizations to do what you're doing, to come and kind of get this niche market around the world?
So to be clear, my business is not selling in China. We're producing in China and then selling in the West, because trying to sell traditional Chinese medicine in China as a foreigner is like going to the North Pole and trying to sell snow to the Eskimos. Yeah. Or going to the desert and selling sand to the Bedouins. It's not a very smart strategy. So I'm not doing that. But I think, in terms of sourcing the product, traditional Chinese medicine, of course, China is the place to go. But then, there are a lot of niche industries that make a lot of sense for foreign entrepreneurs in China. I think the Chinese remain very attracted to a lot of products that come from abroad. One industry that I've always been interested in is the food industry. I actually studied in that field. Okay. I'm an hotelier by training, so hospitality, food, and beverage, and more and more Chinese people love food from different regions around the world. So if you want to say, to take the example of France, introduce China to some of the best French cheeses, for instance, I think that's very valuable as a business. Still valuable, defendable, because it's hard to produce French cheeses in China. So there remains a lot of business opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I think there are, and in particular, I mean, you mentioned something that's very close to my heart, but a lot of Chinese people haven't discovered cheese yet.
Yeah, it's. I think it's going to come. It takes a bit of palate education because they're not
Yeah.
very used to it. But if I take the example of my wife, for instance, who grew up in Shanghai, the first time she came to Europe, she absolutely hated cheese.
Oh, really?
But yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the case of most Chinese.
Mhm.
She came to study in Switzerland. That's where we met. And our first meal there, she was introduced to cheese fondue, and she was like, "What the, like, what is that?" And she absolutely hated it. But now she loves it. So clearly, you can educate. Everyone can
Yeah.
educate their palate to discover new food. On the other way around, when I first came to China, I couldn't eat Sichuan pepper, for instance.
Right.
Sichuan food, it was that sort of numbing taste was very,
The ma, not the la. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. What was very foreign to me. I didn't get it. I thought it was strange. Now I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Me too.
So no, no,
Yeah, that's really interesting when you talk about cheese. My wife loves cheese. She's born in Guangdong, born in Zhongshan, and first time we went to the UK to meet my father is a big. You open my father's fridge and the smell hits you. He loves blue cheese, Stilton's and
yeah,
Gorgonzola, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And my wife was straight into it. I think it must have been reminding her of stinky tofu or something like
yeah,
that. Joe tofu. So,
yeah,
oh, this is
yeah,
great. I was shocked because I know how difficult it is to get into that kind of cheese flavor, but no, she loved it.
yeah, yeah.
So let's move on to talk about high quality development. So you're talking about kind of niche development there. What do you think of China's? Where do you think China is going in the future? We've gone through the cars. Do you think that's the future, or is there something else?
I mean, I think China is going to try to dominate most of the high tech industries of the future.
Mhm.
So be it green technology like the cars, or quantum computing, AI, biotech, and so on and so forth. So that's clearly part of high quality development. Become a leading edge innovator on technological power.
Mhm.
The way I understand high quality development is also in terms of meritocracy. So making sure that the Chinese system is as fair as possible, which has been a common theme throughout China's history. Actually, yesterday I wrote a thread on Twitter about how in the Tang Dynasty, which is like 7th to 10th century, that's when really they started mainstreaming the imperial exam system, the Keju.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, it was Empress Wu Zetian who did that. And during that dynasty, you could see that the top elite of China, the top bureaucrats, because of that imperial exam system, they went from at the beginning of the dynasty, it was mostly aristocratic families holding those top jobs, and that shifted to just people who were the best at the exam.
Smart
Uh,
people.
yeah, smart people who did not come from those big, powerful families, but just from the people. And ever since that time, China has been trying to, keep that sort of fairness because it instills trust in society, which is very very important. So that's part, and China has also always had problems with it. So, if you take just 5-10 years ago, I think China had one of the world's highest Gini coefficients. The difference between the richest and the poorest. And so there are a lot of initiatives by the government to try and bring that back to a more reasonable level, which is a high quality development, because making sure that everyone benefits from the development, really. And then a high quality development for me is also all the ecological stuff, building that ecological civilization that we spoke about. So getting rid of the polluting industries, getting rid of the oil, coal, and not emitting CO2 and so on and so forth. So
I saw an interesting comment the other day. I was talking about coal. We were specifically talking about Australia, and Australia exports a lot of coal to China. Of course, when I say Australia exports a lot of coal, a lot of Australia's exports come to China, but in terms of what China imports, it's less than 2%. So in terms of Australia, it's 40% of their economy. In terms of China, it's a mosquito that can be swatted away if need be. And this is what the Australians don't understand. But somebody made the point in the comments afterwards that coal is not being used to generate electricity as much as it used to, but it's still absolutely vital and necessary for the manufacturing processes of certain things, such as steel, and in particular steel. If you want to make steel, you have to have high burning coal or high temperature burning coal. And that's the big thing. So China is never going to get away from that. It's still going to need to do that unless it exports that industry the way that America did, because America used to have a huge steel industry. Now it has none. UK had a huge steel industry, and I believe that Tata, the Indian company, are just about to close the last steel foundry in the UK with a loss of 3,000 jobs. China might do the same thing, but where would that go? What would happen to that kind of industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's to be honest, with all the advances that China does in terms of ecological development, I would be more reassured for the atmosphere if that was in China than if it was in a country that cares less about ecology. But you're right that coal will probably still be, needed for a lot of other uses than generating energy. I was seeing the other day, for instance, some Chinese scientists managed to develop proteins from coal, because coal at the origin is wood. It's organic matter, and so they found a way to get some eatable or edible organic matter out of coal, with which they could feed livestock. So that could be a use that's not polluting either, and actually is good for the environment, because if you feed livestock with this instead of having to cut forest and replace it with fields of wheat and so on that you then need to service with tractors, that's clearly less good than using coal that's already there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never knew about that. My father was in the oil industry, and he spent a couple of years working in central London with the National Coal Board in the UK. And what they were working on was a project to develop products from coal and from oil. It was a joint thing. He worked for BP, and the National Coal Board and BP were working together on this. And at the end of 2 years working there, he basically stopped and went to do something else. And I remember asking him what happened with it, and he just said nothing ever came of it. It was just a waste of 2 years. He enjoyed working there.
They should have thought about making people eat the coal or
Yeah.
livestock.
Yeah, then we eat the livestock.
Yeah, yeah,
So
true.
I want to ask you a personal question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You seem to be so knowledgeable on such a broad range of things on Twitter. I want to know, where do you source your materials from?
Ooh, well, I read a lot. I read quite a lot
I
of
guess
books.
that.
So I don't know. I read 1 or 2 books a week. I just read before I sleep, and then I find interesting material here and there in my readings. And then simply every morning when I wake up, I read the news on different news sources. So, it either comes from Twitter, or I read the major newspapers every morning from
Yeah.
different regions around the world. Reddit also, I go on Reddit from time to time. That's it basically.
I've never used Reddit. I've actually avoided Reddit completely. I've been told that it's a bit of a worse than Twitter or worse
Yeah,
than X.
it's quite bad, but you have a couple of subreddits which are not bad.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to China, there is one called Sino, r/Sino, which
Right.
is quite good in terms of information on China.
Right. Do your followers or even some detractors inspire you to write things?
Yeah, sure. I mean, people who inspire me to write things are people I follow. And then, of course, some followers sometimes write a comment that I find interesting, and then I will write about that. Or in terms of detractors, if for instance I always hear the wrong argument on something, whether it relates to China or another topic, then at some point I will be fed up and say, okay, I will do one tweet to like permanently debunk that argument.
Right.
And then whenever someone makes that argument again, I can just link to that specific tweet.
And what do your family think about this? You must spend a lot of time on social media.
Yeah, I try not to spend too much time. I don't know, maybe 2-3 hours a day on Twitter, which is already a lot. And I mean, my wife is not particularly pleased. She keeps telling me that because we're co-founders of the same company, we work together. So yeah, she keeps telling me to get back to work.
Is the boss?
Yeah, she's the boss. So yeah, and then I have 2 daughters, and I think they're relatively indifferent. They're not on social media anyway, so
Right.
yeah, that's.
And I remember your daughter nearly lost a finger. You were quite pleased with the Chinese medical system a few years ago.
Yeah,
Worrying time.
that was quite scary. Yeah, we were doing an RV trip we were in Gansu province, in the middle of nowhere, really. She managed. She was quite small, 2.5 years old, I think. She managed to basically put her thumb in the door of the toilet of the RV, which sectioned her thumb. And that was very scary because we were, really in the middle of the Gansu countryside with her finger like just cut open. It was just hanging there. And so I looked at the GPS on the nearest town was like 1 hour drive away, and we drove as fast as we could. And we arrived at that town main hospital. We rush in there. We go see the doctor. The doctor tells us, unfortunately, I think she's gonna lose her thumb because we don't have that expertise. So we just need to cut what's still hanging there. But you might want to try that other clinic, which is also in the town. Maybe they can do something. And so we rushed to that other clinic. And when we arrived in the clinic's main hall, what do we see on the walls? We see pictures of severed fingers and toes everywhere. And so we were like, whoa, those guys are like, we're in the right place. Those guys are the specialists of this. And they managed, thankfully, to save her thumb. So she immediately went on the surgery block and they put it back together. And if you look today, it's just a normal thumb. It's been completely fixed. So we were quite lucky.
Yeah, very lucky to find an expert like that. It's an incredible story. I mean, do you think what would have happened if that had happened in another country?
I guess it depends on the other country. If that happened in the US, we would have spent an absolute fortune.
True. Yeah.
Whereas for that surgery, I can't remember how much we spent, but it must have been the equivalent of $100, something like that. I mean,
100 euros.
Something like that. Yeah.
For surgery.
Yeah, it was very, very cheap. And in the US, I'm pretty sure you could have multiplied that by at least 100. Yeah. I mean, surely they have the competency in America or in Europe, but things are just much more expensive.
I'm going to put this comment up because this comment is the reason why I raised it, because brother, he says, I'm still kind of traumatized by your daughter's thumb incident.
Well, me too.
And I was too. I mean, we were following that. Wow, this is terrible. And she's such a gorgeous kid as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, all is well that ends well. She's her thumb is perfectly fine. You can't even see a scar today.
Yeah. I'm trying to remove that now. There you go. So I guess the last question: you're in KL right now? Are you coming back to China? And what does the future hold for the big industry that you're in now with your entrepreneurial skills? You're always doing something different. What's the future hold for the Bertrand family?
So the reason why we're in KL now is it is for business reasons, because for our business, which is traditional Chinese medicine, our whole purpose is to teach TCM on how it can be useful. So the name of our company is Mi and Qi, the Qi of Chinese medicine, and how it can be useful to people. So it's very often the case that for one health issue or another, you've tried everything in Western medicine, you haven't found a solution. Like I used to have those huge headaches every week, and it was really, really, affecting me a lot. My life quality. Headaches, you can't do anything if it's strong. And I tried everything in Western medicine. I couldn't solve it. And then finally in China, I went to a TCM doctor, and he prescribed a specific herbal formula, and it was gone. I haven't had those headache issues since. I think TCM can be very useful for a lot of similar chronic issues, like headaches or skin issues like eczema, or chronic pain issues like arthritis and so on. And so what we want to do with Mi and Qi is explain this to the West, because people in China are aware of that, not so much in the West. That's why we moved to Kuala Lumpur, because we want to hire people who have an excellent understanding of Chinese culture and TCM. And 1/3 of the population here in Malaysia is Chinese, ethnically Chinese, but who also have an excellent level of English and understand the West as well, which is the case in Malaysia, because English is one of the national languages. It's a former colony of the UK, sadly, but that means that they understand the West. So the idea is to hire that type of profile here in Malaysia, for the business. And so
Dual
the
use
future,
employee.
huh?
A dual use employee.
Yeah. And so the future for us is, just working on that business. We come back to China very often. We spent last summer there doing a 5-week, another RV road trip during 5 weeks in the northeast of China. I've come back to China again since. I was there in October. So, China is just nearby. We go there all the time.
All right, and the last question I have for you is from the audience, and since I'm in Guangdong, and the reason I set these 3 interviews up was to talk about Guangdong's the dual sessions or 2 sessions, and where Guangdong is going. Do you know very much about Guangdong?
I've been there 4 or 5 times, so I know. As much as someone who's been there 4 or 5 times knows. I guess.
Do you understand what the GBA is, the Greater Bay Area?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's the whole. It's Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong, right? It includes Hong Kong.
It includes Hong Kong and Macau, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to ask you about this, is because Macau is very, very big in this TCM.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I actually have friends who work in TCM there.
So Hengqin is the next big TCM center, I think, in the world. Are you familiar with Hengqin?
I'm not familiar with Hengqin. It's in Macau?
Kind of yes and kind of no. The answer to that is no, but it is. Yes. It's a really complicated thing. It's a deep cooperation zone, which is part of Zhuhai. The city of Zhuhai is where Macau's a peninsula, not an island, and it joins the country, it joins China, it joins its own country at Zhuhai. There's a border crossing there that you walk across. You can also ferry across there.
I've been there actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hengqin has this cooperation area where they are working very, very closely with a lot of the Portuguese-speaking world, which is bigger than I thought it was. And Brazil, of course, but there's quite a few African countries that also speak Portuguese. And now they're kind of specialized as a TCM center, and it might be useful to you.
Yeah, I actually, a good friend of mine who is Portuguese, a Portuguese TCM doctor, works there in Macau with one of the China's top TCM professor in his lab. So he updates me from time to time on what's going on there, and he is also doing a lot of very positive initiative to spread TCM to Portuguese-speaking countries like his own Portugal and Brazil.
So he's probably working with the Hengqin local government there, and possibly the GBA government as well. GBA doesn't have a government; it's a region. I think it's 9 cities and the 2 SARs, so 11 metropolises. I'm in one of them. It's Zhongshan. And it goes up north of Guangzhou and all the way south to down both sides of the Pearl River into Hong Kong and Macau. So all that area, and they have a very, very they're more than $2 trillion US dollar GDP. So it's pretty big.
Yeah, TCM is huge in China. If you look at sales of pharmaceutical products overall in China, I think the share of TCM, if I remember correctly, is something like 40%. So if you consider, the pharmaceutical industry in China overall, 40% of that is absolutely massive. So it is a huge industry. And my bet with me and Xi is that as people in the West understand how helpful it can be, it can grow into a very big industry as well.
Yeah, I think it can. There's one company I think, one company in the world which is a total TCM company that is on the Forbes 500 list, and I think it's right up in the 200 or 300s. It's Guangdong Pharmaceutical Holdings. I don't know if, I think it's probably a state-owned enterprise, but it's a massive company. They're doing a lot of stuff there. Yeah. So is there anything else before we end up? We've gone over the hour, which is, it's always good when we get over the hour. It's shot by. It's really fascinating talking to you. Where can people find you? I guess that's the next thing, because you're not on YouTube. Can I post up your Twitter X account?
Yeah, sure. I'm just on X, basically. So
it's just at Arnaud Bertrand, correct?
At starting with the R.
Yes, starts with an R. Actually, you're the easiest person to find, because R and N don't go together very often.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's why I have so many followers. People just,
there you go. At Arnaud Bertrand. Have I spelled that? I noticed, somebody else noticed I spelled your name wrong. I put it right on the, I fixed it now, but I had your name correctly on the thumbnail, but incorrectly in the title. So have I spelled that correctly?
Yeah, that one, you got it right. It's exactly that.
Great. So that's where people can find you. So thank you very much. Next time we're in Malaysia, I'll give you a call and we'll catch up for something to eat or drink. I haven't been there for 5 years, but I love Malaysia. So.
Yeah, Malaysia is a very nice place. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. Thanks for your insightful knowledge. I'm really, really happy to catch up with you again. And let's do it again in the future.
With pleasure.
Okay, thank you. And everybody else, we went over the 100 viewers this morning, which is pretty good, I think. Thank you very much, everyone, for your questions, your comments, and for joining us today. So it's a goodbye from me, and it's a goodbye from Arnaud as well.